is the woke tide ebbing?
I saw a Babylon Bee headline that said Victoria's Secret was quietly canceling their Lizzo line.
Yeah, if you do something tremendously stupid, you should lose your customers, But then there's no need to ruin anyone's lives, except maybe the idiot VP who was in charge of all this from the beginning. And now no one drinks Bud Light, because if you do, you're gay.
The problem with woke is it never really started with reality. It started with a narrative that wasn't actually based on a solid reality of what was going on in the West.
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast. I'm sitting here with Thomas and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Today, we are talking about a question we have, which is the woke tide ebbing? It seems to us that maybe it is. So we'll start with that question. Is the woke tide ebbing? Andrew?
We have some evidence that it is in certain areas.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we want to dig directly into those.
Some of the general ones are up next. So yes, there's some evidence for it. Thomas,
I'd say so.
What's your take?
Yes, but with a lot of caveats.
Yeah, I think so too. The other question we kind of threw around was, is the woke tide already out? Mm-hmm. I don't think it is already out. I do think it's ebbing. That's not to say that it couldn't flow back in. But right now, I think it's ebbing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we've seen a lot of really, I think, hopeful things recently. We've seen in the past year, we saw these big Bud Light protests after the whole Dylan Mulvaney thing. And now no one drinks Bud Light, because if you do, you're gay.
Oh my gosh.
We're not going to get canceled. I mean, come on.
That happened a long time ago.
Well, but also,
Well, I mean, let's throw the caveat on with Bud Light right off the bat.
Now, I guess we haven't heard this. Tell us about it, Thomas.
Dana White just signed a deal with Bud Light to sponsor.
What?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's trying. His argument is this. He's not trying to apologize for or make an excuse necessarily for Bud Light's Dylan Mulvaney thing. But what his take is, historically and currently, Bud Light has had a lot of quality people working for them. It's a big company. It's had conservative roots for a long time, and that people are losing jobs over this, and, it'd be nice to help those good people continue to have a job. That's kind of his argument. I mean...
Okay. Who is... I'm still a little bit lost. Who's Dana White? Is that what
Dana White? It's Dana White, I believe. He's the owner of MMA.
Trying to refurbish it.
Yeah, so we're not canceling. He's not canceling it. He's trying to save it. It's kind of like
right,
bailout.
That would be the
That is the
idea.
way it should be. If you do something tremendously stupid, you should lose your customers, But then there's no need to ruin anyone's lives, except maybe the idiot VP who was in charge of all this from the beginning.
Well, I mean, the one caveat, I keep using that word, here with this is, or the one disappointment to this is that Bud Light still hasn't actually apologized for that move.
Right.
It should offer a mea culpa and say, hey, this was stupid. Supporting Dylan Mulvaney and his gender bending is not something that we should have done, and we apologize for that. Then they would win back all their fans, I think.
Well, they would have. I think it's probably too late at this point.
Well, still, there's better late than never.
Yeah.
And this, to me, seems like they're trying to just hope for never and that they can just get past it. And maybe they will over the long run, but
right.
It's too bad.
Well, that's all interesting, but that's not our main topic. That's just one of the many evidences we have.
Right.
On top of that, we've got things like, the whole backlash with Target where they had to, in the South at least, move their LGBTQ stuff out of the front where they had disgusting bathing suits and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there was also designs from a overt Satanist.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And a bunch of nasty stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turns out most people aren't fans of pedophilia.
Yeah.
Or Satanism.
Not that there's not an effort to normalize it, because there definitely is. But then we've also got other areas like, not that this is anything that we're too in tune with, but I have seen this headline that apparently Victoria's Secret is turning away from wokeness, i.e. body positivity in their
Yeah.
models and going for sexy people again, which is like, you're a lingerie company. That makes sense. That should have been your focus the whole time.
I saw a Babylon Bee headline that said Victoria's Secret was quietly canceling their Lizzo line.
Yeah. Babylon Bee is so good.
Oh, you guys are great over there.
Speaking of them, it's been a banner year since we mentioned Dylan Mulvaney for him, because he just got named Woman of the Year by some magazine that doesn't normally do that, and Man of the Year by Babylon Bee. So he's just winning everything.
Oh my gosh. There's some more examples.
There's more examples. Coca-Cola has removed their support from BLM from their website, and
when did that happen? That must have
in the
happened
past week. Just literally since this whole
It's
10/7
Hamas
thing.
is because of it, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is the week of the 23rd, 24th right now.
Yes, today's the 26th. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's also this whole Snow White thing where the actress who's playing Snow White in the upcoming Disney remake completely trashed the story of Snow White, and seemingly everyone was like, this is an American classic, and it's generally a classic fairy tale. What's wrong with you? You should appreciate the big break you're being given. And
Yeah, she saying that Snow White now is not going to be a victim. She's going to be like a boss. And
right. She's not dreaming about true love. She's looking to effectively set up her own entrepreneurial business or whatever. And it's like, she's a 13-year-old princess or however old she is. You know,
Yeah.
whatever.
It was a down with the patriarchy kind of a statement.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the Daily Wire version.
Right. So that's the other thing, is the Daily Wire is now releasing a competing Snow White movie with Brett Cooper, who does have black hair in the movie, fair skin, and red lips. So it's, Snow White, her hair was black as ebon, her skin was white as snow, and her lips were red as roses or rubies. I'm not sure which.
And Ben Shapiro's going to play every single one of the seven dwarfs.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that was another Babylon Bee headline.
Right,
Probably.
right. Because the
probably.
seven dwarfs in Disney's version are not dwarfs anymore. They're seven magical hobos. apparently.
What in the world?
If you've seen the image, they're not. They're men.
Yeah.
They're women. They're tall. They're short. They're black. They're white. They're just. How
They're
are these?
They're not dwarves, in other words.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, people are just tired of it. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's weird, and it is just not in line with what normal people care about.
Well,
Right.
like we've said multiple times when we've discussed woke, the problem with woke is it's not creative. It doesn't have anything to offer. All it has to do is tear down what was before.
And every once in a while, people realize, oh, these things we have are pretty cool. Maybe we don't tear them down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is why I think, and when we're talking about the potential ebbing of woke, one of the factors is just that it's not giving people anything.
Right. I think that's something we touched on briefly before we started, but
Right.
it's not so much as the conservative movement would like to destroy woke, that the conservative movement has been destroying woke. It hasn't. It's done good at pushing back where necessary, but it's not like conservatives are undoing woke. Woke is undoing itself.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here.
Yeah.
But I'm going to throw to you, Andrew, because you've got kind of a more interesting, I think, focus on this whole ordeal and why this is changing. So what's your idea for this?
Yeah, so I think that, well, first of all, part of the direction this is going, I think, is due to when times get hard
Yeah.
and real, this stuff just falls away. Because when you don't have time to think up all of these problems, when the world is a dangerous place,
Yeah.
and I'll comment on a specific point of the world being a dangerous place right here. When the world is a dangerous place and we're worried about war, we're worried about famine,
Yeah.
national security, our institutions falling apart, our economy falling apart,
Mm-hmm.
woke is not going to put groceries on the table.
Nope.
It's not going to keep our border safe.
Nope.
It's not going to keep terrorists out of our communities.
Nope. But it will tell you why paying more for bananas and eggs is a good thing. It will tell you why having a closed border is an evil thing. And it will tell you why the terrorist living next door to you is actually the goal of Western society for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Well, it's that classic example of when the fantasy is finally confronted by reality, the fantasy quickly dissolves.
Yeah.
And reality it's not subject to emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thought on that line, though, has been, this is going to disperse as soon as it's faced with reality from a decade ago or more, where these stupid social justice warrior college students, they'll learn when they go in the real world. And then it seemed like, and it has been, that, it seems like the real world is bending to their crazy beliefs instead of the other way around. And now we're seeing a little bit of, okay, maybe the real world really is having its say finally.
Yeah, it is. I mean, what we've said with woke is it's a revolutionary idea, but what it is Marxism repackaged.
Yep.
And so it's an old revolutionary idea, but it's, put on a different outfit, as it were.
James Lindsay is calling it a different species of the genus Marxism. So where Soviet-style communism was like a gorilla, wokeism is like a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
They're still closely related.
Yeah. And so the revolutionary ideas that survive long term have a lasting impact because they still have to deal with elements of reality, and maybe they're bending reality to their will to some degree, but they're still dealing with reality. The problem with woke is it never really started with reality. It started with a narrative that wasn't actually based on a solid reality of what was going on in the West. It could pick apart elements of things that are deserved criticism for failing in certain ways. But it kind of like what we said with some of these other influencers, they might pinpoint the problem, but then they offer a solution that won't solve it.
That's not a solution. Yeah, you can't critique your way out of a 10-foot hole in the ground.
Yeah.
You have to have a ladder.
Well, I think that gets actually back to being confronted with reality. And then also when reality strikes, it exposes the truth.
Yep.
And a really good example of that, and we listed several examples of movements or organizations or things backing off of the woke.
Yep.
One example is Black Lives Matter, where they have actually leaned in to saying, hey, this is who we are. And on that note, Coca-Cola, they removed their endorsement to Black Lives Matter. But when the attacks happened on 10/7,
on Israel, from Hamas.
The terrorist attacks, Black Lives Matter stood in solidarity with Palestine and tweeted out literal images of the paragliders. And for those who may not be aware, that was a key element of the assault. Yeah,
specifically on the music festival. This was just, there's no way to spin that image except as terrorist propaganda.
Right. So Black Lives Matter literally posting out, we are for terrorists killing babies. Essentially.
And innocent festival goers.
Yeah. That is the reality strikes, and believe people when they tell you who they are.
Right.
And they have leaned in many times and said, we are Marxist. And to what you're saying, Thomas, it's just woke is repackaged Marxism. And they've said we are trained Marxists, and essentially they are for the destruction of civilization.
Yeah, decolonization. That's their word.
Let's put it this way: they're for the destruction of the West and Western civilization. They believe, that it's an inherently unfair system because not everyone, that the whole equity dynamic, not everyone ends up exactly with the same.
Well, it's the oppressor-oppressed dynamic, which is what is utilized as a tool in a Marxist system to overthrow an existing society and then force revolution so that the next society can be reborn.
Right. It's kind of like, there's so much self-hatred tied up with the whole worldview of BLM and the decolonization and saying, settlers are not civilians and things like that.
Yeah, settlers are not civilians.
That wasn't BLM. I think it was a Yale professor, but it was supporting BLM's line on this whole issue. But there's so much self-hatred in this. It's like if you convinced an anthill that the queen of the anthill was oppressing them and they needed to kill the queen. Well, then the whole anthill dies.
I hope when people see this, and I think that Coca-Cola and their action is maybe a sign of this happening.
Yep.
And that is the woke tide ebbing, when it becomes so obvious and blatant that this is the side that stands with evil.
Yep.
And maybe beforehand it was too subtle or too obfuscated.
Or people just didn't believe the things BLM said.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
but it's crystal clear now. I mean, you can't get more clear than that.
No.
Well, I mean, the narrative that BLM was pumping was that our systems are corrupt, not only corrupt, but they are systemically evil, systemically racism. You know, like effectively every police department exists solely for the oppression of colored people.
Right.
Is kind of the
theme. Hang on. You said that wrong. You put the colored in front of the word people instead of vice versa. That makes you racist.
Yep.
It's people of color, Thomas.
Pox on my house, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that why now woke is suddenly being exposed is it was preaching effectively a lie. It was a narrative that it kept repeating and repeating and repeating, and they could point to these certain incidents, like let's use George Floyd as an example, which kind of ignited it, but there was others before that. And they could talk about it in such a fashion that they almost controlled how it was talked about.
Right. So on that topic of the narrative and BLM controlling how these things are talked about, I think that feeds into your topic here. So
in which is the control of kind of the circles or the media scape that we run in, which is social media, social media. One of the things that we've long bemoaned over the last 5 years, at least, probably longer, but 5 years, is how the big tech industry, the big tech social media companies primarily, have all been effectively run by the left, the woke.
Right. They're silencing voices they don't like and pushing the narrative they do.
Right.
Yeah, it's true for the mainstream media as well.
Right, and they were actively engaged in this. And so one of the things that has helped to break this monopoly was Elon Musk.
Yep.
Buying Twitter, now X, and then...
Weird name, by the way. Musk, I like you, but...
Well, he names everything X.
I know.
Yeah, it's true.
So he not only exposed what was going on in Twitter with the Twitter files.
Oh, yeah. And
so the government literally working with social media companies saying, we want this censored, we want this person banned, this information good, this information bad, suppress this, expose, promote this, etc.
And if you want a specific example on that, it's the laptop from hell. That's
the Hunter Biden laptop.
Hunter Biden laptop is one major example.
Reached out to these Facebook and Twitter and all these companies
via
the FBI and said, there's going to be some disinformation soon about Biden, so when you see it, make sure to censor that.
It's coming from Russia.
Right. And the disinformation was the laptop that was totally credible, totally reliable, and absolutely factually true, and has been demonstrated again and again and again to not be disinformation, to be just factual truth.
That would have influenced the outcome of the election. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, according to polls, yes.
Yes.
Anyway, what Musk, by effectively breaking the stranglehold on social media by the woke left, and then allowing for and promoting more of a free speech platform. Now, it's not perfect, but it's getting better, actually. The different systems that have been put in place since he's taken over, like
the community notes.
The community notes, for example.
Yeah.
It allows for what the whole ideal behind free speech is, that ultimately truth wins.
Right.
And so if you believe in that, then you're going to do everything you can to ensure that free speech is permitted. And so I think that's what we're starting to see with this. But what we see with what happened with Hamas, people are shocked by like real evil. And they're suddenly like, okay, we've been told all this stuff about how terrible and systemically racist America is, which it is not. I mean, we've had our periods of racism for sure. Yeah. But it's not today, and it hasn't been a major problem for, I would say, 40 years.
Right.
And so now we see something that is, you want to see bad racism? Boom. Right there. I mean, the idea that Palestinians are bragging about killing Jews.
And they're calling home saying, hey, Dad, I killed Jews. Your son killed Jews with my own hands. And Dad's like, great. So that's not hyperbole. You can listen to these phone calls.
Yeah. This is, and thankfully, Twitter, X, is in a place where this stuff got out and isn't being censored, thankfully. Yeah. And the narrative isn't being carefully crafted from Washington or from Silicon Valley or both in cahoots, or I don't know who else might be in this kind of information control conspiracy.
Right. You're seeing videos from the Hamas members. You're seeing videos from the IDF.
Yeah.
You're seeing what's happening on the ground without any kind of spin before you see it.
Right. And so what it forces is the question of, wait a second, the whole narrative for woke has primarily been focused on the West, saying the West, and specifically America, is the problem of the world.
Yep.
Now, when you want to compare and see what real, just racist evil looks like, and then say, okay, what is the problem? What's the real problem here?
Right. Try to convince an Israeli today that global warming is the biggest threat to humanity right now.
It's the existential crisis of our day.
Yeah, I know.
Yet, meanwhile, we're going to force the EVs and destroy our energy policy here at home. But let's see, then that's going to drive oil prices up, and who's a major producer of oil? Iran. And who funds all of these terrorist organizations? Iran. And
not just that, at this point now, these terrorist organizations that are working for Iran are attacking U.S. outposts in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Over 24 U.S. soldiers have been wounded in the last couple of weeks.
Ridiculous. All caused by poor energy policy driven by the green dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that is starting to come to a head. People are starting to ask the questions about, wait, where is the practical reality of going green actually going to end us up at? And more people are starting to ask that question. But I think even sooner, Sterling, is the issue with immigration or illegal immigration that's really waking up a lot of these folks.
Are all examples of reality showing itself and impacting people physically.
Right, and these are all woke issues that they've been pushing.
Yeah.
So they pushed decolonization with Hamas, they pushed the narrative with Twitter, and now they've been pushing this idea that no person is illegal and that the border should be open and that America is just so wealthy. And this is, I think, part of the misconceit people have about this, that they think America's so wealthy, so powerful, so big, that there's no number of people coming into the U.S. illegally that could affect our standard of living. And thankfully, some bright-thinking people in Texas and Florida, Governor Greg Abbott and Governor Ron DeSantis, came up with a really good way to prove that, no, it's going to affect your standard of living. And so they started busing and shipping these migrants to these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, all of Massachusetts. And now you have the governor of New York City, Eric Adams, saying, this is a horrible, horrible problem. We cannot house all these people, and I don't see a solution to it.
Yeah,
call on the government, the federal government, to do something about this.
Yeah.
And so when you have the Democratic mayor of New York City calling on Biden to do something about the border, then suddenly it's like, oh, this is real. I actually do. It's not just affecting Texas and Arizona and New Mexico, which I don't care about because those they don't vote for me anyway. But New York, they vote for me, so I guess I got to do something now.
Well, we'll see if they do something. I mean, I guess he has admitted, well, we got to build some of the wall.
Well, he says we gotta. My hands are tied. I have to build the wall. Of course, that's never stopped him before.
No, it was the same excuse he used in getting out of Afghanistan the way he did. Well, I couldn't do anything about that. That plan was laid before he came to office.
Right.
Could have changed it like you did
all
all the others.
No, not the way you did it.
Yeah, I think that it's not that the leaders are squawking is one thing. I think what's even more telling is that their constituents are squawking and mad. And these are constituents that are the ones that generally are the the left's base, like the Democrat base.
Right. I would imagine that no New Yorker in the year 2019 or 2016, when Trump was talking about building the wall, I imagine that there was almost no New Yorker who'd ever actually met an illegal immigrant, who had just come over, and they never conceived that this could affect their life in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I'm sure they met him, but I don't know that they saw the problem of, tens of thousands. And that's
and now with more than 60,000 illegals in New York City, they're like, oh, this is a problem.
Well, it is. Anytime you absorb a significant population of people who literally have nothing.
They lots of them can't speak the language.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily trained for we're not getting good people. We're getting just people who are coming because the border's open. So they're not necessarily trained in any skill we need. They're not currently necessarily useful to America. And that is something that should matter in who you let into your country.
In addition to that, I think this week, it was either this week or last week, up to 10 Iranians were captured at the border, and
terror watch list.
At least two of them were on the terror watch list. So it's not just people who are coming, regular people trying to have a better life, which I have sympathy for people who want
sympathy with that.
a better life, but that's not the only issue of draining resources, but it's literal terrorists just coming across the border from
number
Iran.
of people on the FBI watch list who've been apprehended at the border is I think it's dozens, if not over 100.
There have been North Koreans.
Yeah.
I mean, good grief.
What it exposes is the fallacious concept of no borders being a legitimate kind of,
and just the simple idea of no person is illegal.
Right.
If
well,
if Osama bin Laden was coming across the border, you can bet that AOC would be saying that person's illegal.
Well, I think that it's unfortunately the term has been used disingenuously. They threw out, well, no person's illegal. Well, in what context? That's what's missing. Yeah. We're not saying that they're an illegal human being.
Right. It's not illegal for them to be alive.
Right. That's not what the term illegal alien is referring to.
It's referring to the criminal act they, by necessity, by definition, commit in order to enter the United States.
Or that they have overstayed their visa or whatever, and so their actual staying within the country is illegal based upon that law.
But even then, presumably if you were able to secure a visa, there's some value to your presence in the U.S. And people coming across illegally across the border, there's not even that guarantee.
No. I mean, I'm sympathetic toward the idea that we should have a immigration reform, which is kind of a loaded word because depending on what side you're on. But I do think we need truly immigration reform in how we conceive of our immigration system. Yeah. And I do think the work visa system, which we had for a long time before we decided to say, and I don't know exactly when this happened. I don't know if it was 70s. Right? Yeah, when we decided that work visa system that we've had that had where Mexicans have been coming seasonally to work in the fields and stuff. Well, we're going to stop that. That to me, that's foolish. What started to create this whole problem in the first place. It was woke itself is antithetical to how our system was developed and founded. Yeah, and it's attacking that.
And well, it's not just that it's antithetical; it's that its purpose is to be antithetical to those.
Yeah. And so it's inherently anti-American, and so so you can't have woke and the American system working together. No. They just can't. It's trying to mix oil and water. It's not going to work.
It's like these people who think truly that no contradiction between a Christian who believes in Jesus saying that I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, also saying, but Muslims go to heaven too.
Yeah. Well, then
these things are just self-contradictory.
You're trying to mix, two different ideologies that disagree with one another, and disagree with one another fundamentally on what it means for what society is and what a flourishing society looks like. Yep. And individual freedom and the protection of the rights of the individual from the tyranny of a government is not what woke is about. No. Woke says, irrespective to the individual, what we want is everyone the same. Mm-hmm. And what they pitch is we want the government to protect you from everyone else. Right. And they and they don't, and they're opposed to meritocracy, a system that rewards based upon merit. They say no, that's not fair.
They say
That's why,
billionaires shouldn't be allowed to exist.
Like Oregon just passed the school board in the state of Oregon just passed a new rule where, at least for the next 5 years, they're not going to consider competency in reading, writing, and math in order to be able to get your diploma.
To graduate. Yeah.
How is that helpful?
Because doing anything else would be harmful to BIPOC students, Andrew. You racist.
Oh my
Well, the
gosh.
irony is that very
It's
position.
not helping these people.
Well,
because they're graduating, they're getting a diploma that's useless because it doesn't signal anything at all.
Well, that the very concept of that thinking itself is racist.
Right.
If you believe that in order for black people and people of color to be able to graduate high school, you have to lower the standard.
Right.
That is racist.
And I guarantee you, if you got the data and looked at results from 1995 with the same schools probably of black and BIPOC students in 1995 versus today, the results were better in 1995. I guarantee it, just because there were actual standards then.
So going back to our original kind of question, is it ebbing? Is the tide ebbing?
Yes.
I think as more and more of the real world situations mount and woke ideas that have been put up, that the fantasy woke ideals that have been put up to supposedly make for a more just society implode left and right, it becomes easier and faster for people to say this system, whatever they're wanting us to deny, everything before it was much better than this. And I gotta say it was interesting. I think it was a BLM leader in Rhode Island, I think, who has recently come out and endorsed Trump because
that's remarkable.
because he said life was better under Trump.
Holy moly!
So
If the scales falling from eyes here, this is
Yeah.
oh goodness gracious! Never imagined that. Yeah, I think it is ebbing. One area we probably should have budgeted for in our discussion today, but we didn't, is with these higher education, with Harvard and Yale and all these places where you have these big donors who've just blindly been giving money to indoctrination centers for however long, are finally saying, you're supporting the murder of Jews. I'm not giving you any more money.
yeah.
And so once you start hitting Harvard in its wallet, do you think maybe they'll back off on some of their more extreme views and hire better educators? I hope so.
I hope so.
I mean, what we have to be also ready for, and maybe the main word here I'm going to throw out is patience.
Yeah.
This is not something that's going to happen overnight. Rarely does real big good change happen overnight. It's kind of a slog. It's, one step at a time, move it forward. And so these are positive signs. But the battle is nowhere near over on
Right.
this.
We still need momentum. I do think the woke tide is ebbing. That's not to say it couldn't come back in. That's not to say it couldn't get a second wind and start brainwashing people all over again.
Well, the other thing woke is bankrupt with is a vision for the future that is inspiring to and purpose giving to individuals, and especially the young, the generation coming up. What is the vision that they're being given?
Right. And there's such a lack of that you're seeing. The right has some vision. Christianity has some vision, but there's a problem with communicating that, I think. And so what you're getting is, and this is kind of a teaser for one of our future episodes, is this what I'm calling the alt-conservative or alt-traditional views being espoused by people like Andrew Tate and Pearl Davis, which are acknowledging some of the correct problems we see in society, but their solutions aren't.
They wouldn't fix it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we should do a series on this, a culture war series.
Yep. So the next one will be about the alt-traditionalism, I think.
Yeah.
All right, so the summary, the woke tide is ebbing. We think so. For now, it's not a guarantee of the future, but right now it's ebbing. We've talked about Bud Light a little bit, Snow White, Target, Coca-Cola, BLM and Hamas, Twitter and X and Elon Musk, who I don't think anyone would have guessed he would be the free speech advocate we needed in the 21st century, but I'm glad we have him. And, of course, the Ron DeSantis's and Greg Abbott's of the world making the problem hit home in the New York Cities and the Washington, D.C.s of the world. So, this has been our episode on Is the Woke Tide Ebbing? We think so. That's hopeful, and we're glad for that. This has been the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew. The Pop Culture Contrarian is brought to you by The Patriot Post. The Patriot Post is the oldest news, policy, and opinion digest on the web. It's right. It's free. Hey, be sure to like and subscribe, and tell your friends. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.